and welcome to another edition of Your Voice, Your Future. I'm Armstrong Williams. A group of Jewish students recently met with University of Virginia leaders asking them to do more to address anti-Semitism on campus. Sounds familiar? Meanwhile, pro-Palestine student groups are calling on UVA to divest from all companies with ties to Israel. Reporter Nick Minock shows us why both groups are unhappy with UVA's response.
As the conflict between Israel and Gaza continues, so does unrest at the University of Virginia. A student election is being held at UVA, calling on the university's endowment to divest from all companies with ties to Israel. The referendum also criticizes UVA's October 11th message that acknowledged the October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel. The referendum says UVA's message, quote, failed to address the crimes committed by the Israeli government and the ongoing ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, unquote. Students for Justice in Palestine is among the sponsors of the referendum at UVA, which has led similar divest efforts at colleges and universities across the country, including the University of Michigan, the University of Houston, Fresno State University, the University of Minnesota, and Brown University.
This, movement on campus that is just blatantly anti-Semitic.
Joel Need and Jewish students recently met with UVA administrators asking them to do more to address anti-Semitism.
There are students that have been spat upon, shoved, that have been called, sort of horrible names, sort of anti-Semitic slurs. Tragically, there's one kid that has been so intimidated by students in his dorm that for his peace of mind, he has to move off campus and sleep elsewhere and stopped wearing his yarmulke. Other kids say when they walk by these protests, they feel like they need to tuck their jewelry, their Jewish stars into their sweaters or shirts so that no one sees them. So they're hiding. They're hiding their identity.
And that's not all he's concerned about at UVA.
About 70 faculty members signed a letter that, among other things, said that what happened on October 7th needs to be viewed in context. And I don't know how anybody can try to contextualize what happened on October 7th other than just looking at what it was. It was a barbaric, horrible attack with no justification. So you've got all of these things happening and the administration just not doing anything.
A UVA spokesperson said UVA has strongly condemned anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and that UVA created a task force on religious diversity and belonging to make suggestions for where the university can improve. Students for Justice in Palestine have been banned by some colleges, including Columbia and Brandeis. We reached out to SJP for an interview. They have not responded yet. I'm Nick Minock reporting.
Thank you, Nick. Thomas O'Neal is joining us, who's Jefferson Council's co-founder, and he has been following this issue. Exactly who are the Students for Justice in Palestine, and how are they funded?
They're a national group. We're one of, I think, 163 chapters. Funding is a little mysterious. We're not sure. I'm part of this group, as you know, called the Jefferson Council, and that's one of the issues we're facing. But we have met with a lot of the Jewish students and know, particularly the parents who met with President Ryan and others. And believe me, it's as bad, every bit as bad as what's going on at the Ivy League schools.
But this organization has been banned on other prominent campuses.
Correct.
Why?
For precisely what they're doing.
What is it they're actually doing?
Well, they had two demonstrations, one right after, the week after the invasion, one in December. They're violating the Commonwealth law about wearing a mask. That dates back to the KKK. So for that alone, they should be banned. They also were openly not just supporting a Palestinian state, but supporting Hamas, which has been redesignated, as you know, as a terrorist organization. My 2 cents, they should be disbanded for that, or at least reprimanded, and they're allowed to continue. But regarding what your reporter just said, we know for a fact, because we've spoken to some of these students, it's not just verbal harassment. One student in particular, I'll leave unnamed, just didn't say anything, walked by one of their tables, Armstrong, and was spit upon, which is a felony. And that's what they relayed to President Ryan. They're hoping that he does something concrete and doesn't just spew out platitudes. But so far, nothing's been done.
But why allow a hostile environment on any campus where students are there to learn? You spit on someone. What do you hope to accomplish by spitting, disrespecting, singling out people because of their faith or because of their religion? What does it accomplish?
Well, in the absence of action to prevent it, you have to assume they don't disagree with it. That's my conclusion.
The university.
Maybe that's harsh, but this is not speculation. It's concrete. There are videos of this.
Well, I would assume with the kind of money that any parent is paying for a child's education at UVA, this is the last thing they would expect
Absolutely.
in that learning environment.
In-state is about $38,000. Out-of-state, all in, is over $80,000. We're as costly as the Ivies. But cost aside, it shouldn't matter. It could be a community college. It shouldn't be tolerated in an academic environment, as you know.
But how do we get to this place? Because we hear, and Dominick is going to be joining us in this conversation. He's a regular former law enforcement official and talk show host in Chicago. Izzo will be joining us. How does this thrive? How is it in America? And I understand the freedom of speech, but you have to have respected speech. You cannot disrupt or threaten someone's life. Why does this continue? And the UVA is probably the last place that you would think that something like this could gain root.
You would think. Our group was formed, some individuals and I were up to about 3,500 members in September of 2020. And exactly to your point, a student posted on the lawn a sign, FUVA, spelled out, and some other profane things. That was deemed to be by the administration protected First Amendment speech. It isn't. The lawn built by Jefferson is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. 23 in America, it's like the Taj Mahal. I don't think you could put F. Mahatma Gandhi on the Taj Mahal. They wouldn't allow it. He allowed it, and the sign didn't come down for 4 months, and that was the first sign. So if you tolerate that, it's a logical extension that what's happening to these kids, if you don't disagree, that they're, you may not support Hamas, but you certainly shouldn't be supporting a group that does and is terrorizing students.
I wonder what UVA's position would be if they had that same sign and changed the N in to say the LGBTQ community or the African American community,
Sure.
if they're using such profane language. I wonder what would their attitude be to say, would they also say that it's free speech and those signs would have stayed up for 4 or 5 months?
I doubt it, and your reporter was spot on. They condemn Islamophobia. Islamophobia does not exist at UVA. There's not been one incident of Islamophobia. You can't set up a supposedly bipartisan group to condemn anti-Semitism and Islamophobia when only one exists. So to your question, of course it wouldn't be. Nor should it be. It should be condemned immediately.
So why is it that the university leadership allows this double standard?
Well, to be fair, the parents met February 14th. They laid all this out. They now have the proof, but we're 2 weeks later. What I don't understand, Armstrong, is they know who did it, these Students for Justice in Palestine. If I were the president, the next morning I would have gone to the head of the Students for Justice in Palestine, said, okay, who is it who did this? Who's harassing people? Who's spitting on people? You can't wear masks. It's a violation of Commonwealth law. You will stop immediately. You'll be suspended or expelled.
Are they wearing masks because they don't want their identity known?
Exactly. Yes.
But you could easily find out who they are.
Well, it's documented who they are. You have to file to be the organization. The administration knows every member of that group. They don't know who did the spitting, but you can easily find that out.
But there's an issue here with the lack of moral clarity.
Yeah, I agree.
The leadership of the university is failing, so these kids think they're emboldened to up the ante of what they're doing.
If negative actions don't have consequences, they're perpetuated. And that's what's happening. Now, the administration might do something. The parents and students are waiting, but it's been 2 weeks. It shouldn't have been 2 days, in my opinion. But to be fair, they may take action, but no action has been taken since that meeting.
So what is the role of the Jefferson Council in all this?
This is this anti-Jewish thing is recent. There's a move to contextualize Thomas Jefferson. maybe not eradicate them, but denigrate them. That's been going on. This Cavalier Daily, the student paper, has been doing that. Conservative, moderate students who've spoken out are, to use the new term, doxxed or gaslighted. We've defended those students. One young lady, I'll leave unnamed because it's a confidential situation, was falsely accused of a racial epithet. The EOCR group at Virginia, which opines on this, deemed it worthless. The administration went to the offense went to the student-run Judiciary Council, who condemned her. This kid couldn't get a job. She had people threatening her life. She went to the then Dean of Students and the president asking for help, and it was not given to her. So she ended up suing the university, and we don't know the details, but we know the case was settled. That's probably, in my opinion, as a father of 3 girls, the most egregious thing.
But why do we allow the anti-Semitism, the bigotry,
Right.
the hate against anyone to continue on these university campuses?
You shouldn't. It's unconscionable.
Well, who's making the decision not to shut it down? Obviously, there is someone who can say, shut this down. Is it because of funding that's coming from some specific group to the university? They don't want to offend or lose the money. Is it because of someone has a different ideological perspective on this? But why is it that because it's clear to most people on the outside that this should never have gained any ground. You could just shut this down because you want an environment where kids are learning. It's already intense. They already have many distractions, and that's one of the top universities in the country.
Yep. Ultimately, the board can control it, but it's not just at UVA. As you know, Armstrong, the boards of most of these, it's not meant as a pejorative comment, but they're kind of rubber stamps for the administration. Governor Youngkin has appointed 8 appointees to a 7-person board. They'll have 13 in July, so his appointees will have a majority. Many of them, like me, have a business background, and the boards I sat on, and I've been on dozens. If the CEO of my company was behaving like that,
why do you need a board to tell you what's common sense?
Oh, no, I agree.
Armstrong
You
Williams,
shouldn't.
And we'll be back on Your Voice in Your Future. Don't go away. You know, this is just something that is totally mind-boggling when you think about what has happened since October 7th, that a lot of these pro-Palestine groups have felt emboldened. I mean, this is not what peaceful protests is supposed to be about. And when you don't like certain things that go on campuses, you don't further make other victims at the expense of something that you don't like. There are normally procedures and processes in place to deal with this. Right. But it seems as though the leadership has just totally just shirked all responsibility, and they're just offended. They're just afraid to offend anyone.
Well, to specifically answer your question as to how could this happen, your reporter alluded to it. The Students for Justice in Palestine came out with a letter October 8th. It didn't just say we want a Palestinian state. It overtly supported the Hamas invasion, said that the genocide didn't happen, women weren't raped, people weren't killed, and that this was a result of Israeli colonization, which is just a factual lie. It isn't. You know, they claim the West Bank settlements are illegal. They're not. So I don't have the exact number, Armstrong, but it was like over 100 faculty co-signed that letter. So there's no other conclusion to make but that they agree with that the Hamas invasion of Israel was justified, and therefore any response to that from the Israelis is morally indefensible. The facts are the exact opposite, the exact opposite. So if the administration does not do anything about this, and I hope they do, but if they don't, what other conclusion can one make but that they side with Hamas and they don't have a problem with it? And I'm not saying that they're going to do that, but the meeting that was held 2 weeks ago was, I have a transcript of it, was incredible. And there's proof that these kids are being harassed. If nothing is done, a change has to be made because it's unconscionable.
Is this a trend happening on these elite,
Oh, yeah.
at these elite universities?
Yeah. We didn't know how bad it was until we started digging in the fall of 2020. I know we're part of a larger group called the Alumni Free Speech Alliance. Cornell, Princeton, Harvard, Washington Lee. Same thing's happening in all those campuses. Top 24 universities in the nation are part of it. Exactly the same thing is happening.
So is this organized? Are they testing just how far they can go with this?
Yes, they are. Academia has been co-opted. I mean, that's my opinion.
But co-opted by whom?
By an intolerant, monolithic far left. That may sound extreme, but that's what's happened. I wouldn't tolerate that if conservatives were doing that. It wouldn't be correct. You have to have civility and divergent viewpoints talking in a civil manner, and that isn't happening right now.
But why is it just that a select few certain segments are allowed to get away with this wherever, and there are no consequences?
We had a quick aside, but it's key. We had a talk at UVA a couple weeks ago by Jonathan Haidt, if you know him. He was a professor at UVA, now he's at NYU, self-professed, very liberal. In 2015, he started a group called the Heterodox Academy, which is faculty. He said he'd never read a conservative entity until he read the National Review. He read that and his eyes opened. And now he realizes how intolerant a lot of his friends were. So he's a moderate liberal who's every bit as you and I are for open diversity in speech. The talk was amazing. And to hear a converted liberal admit that was something. And I would not tolerate intolerance on the part of conservative students. I have siblings that are liberal. You know, we're civil to each other. You hit the nail on the head. It's common sense. You love people, you treat them with respect. That isn't happening.
But what is it doing for the education environment of these universities?
It's killing it. These kids are being absolutely indoctrinated. Two of our daughters went to UVA, and when I started asking them what happened, I had no clue until they started opening up. And interestingly, some faculty shut them down, but it's more the kids than the faculty. If you bring up a countervailing viewpoint in a class and it's moderate or conservative, you're attacked. But and this isn't every class, don't get me wrong, but there are enough incidents of that it's reprehensible. And the kids are really almost worse than some of the faculty.
But there must be instances where some universities are fighting back against this and they're successful. I can't imagine universities with what's at stake here just laying down and taking this without any fight.
Well, so far they've been able to do it with impunity because you have a lot of wealthy donors who are oblivious to it. And they haven't, Harvard's got a $55 billion endowment. They don't care. If somebody says, I'm going to stop giving you money, unless you're, the most recent guy, Ackerman, they don't care. So people who are going to give hundreds of billions have to stand up because, unfortunately, money talks. UVA has not had anybody step up like that yet. So we're doing a grassroots effort trying to get students and faculty and parents, like these admirable Jewish parents, to meet it head on and meet with the president.
But
That's what
it's
they're doing.
not enough for Jewish parents to
No, I agree.
It's for all parents to stand up. It doesn't matter where you give the money and why you give it, but you should stand up against this lack of civility. It's violence, disrespect, and you're creating a hostile environment for learning.
Well, outside of Jefferson Council, I'm organizing a group of UVA alumni in mid-March to do exactly what you're saying. To my knowledge, and you may be aware of one, I'm not. I don't think any Christian alumni have stood up against what's happening. We're going to do that. It's going to be peaceful. It's going to be positive and proactive. But we hope to get a couple hundred people on the lawn in the rotunda to speak up in supporting our Jewish students and supporting Israel. We have to get a permit for that, and we're in the midst of trying to do that. But I totally agree with you. It's time for people to stand up. My favorite quote, Armstrong, is Sir Edmund Burke. The only thing they need for evil to exist is good men to do nothing. Good men have to stand up and do something.
Finally, before we say goodbye to you, how have these kids become so indoctrinated, so blind to the whole story, the whole truth? Not once has anyone in the leadership of Hamas apologized for October 7th, 2023. Not once has Hamas given any indication that if Israel were to cease its annihilation, because that's what it is, of Gaza, that they've learned anything.
Right.
They would continue the escalation. I mean, if you think about that, you just think about it, if you don't feel you've done anything wrong, and how can you not see the faults in Hamas and the fact that they killed hundreds and hundreds of people died, and they're still holding people hostages, but yet they get a pass. You don't even have feminists around the world speaking out against the rape. They speak out against everything else, the hypocrisy there, but you don't hear these feminist groups speaking out against it. Why? Why such a deafening silence?
And putting Palestinian innocent citizens around their military sites. So when you take out the military sites, you're killing Palestinians. Well, in an extreme Islamic environment, death for Allah is salvation. And that these guys are not mainline Muslims who are fine. They're extremists.
But I'm talking about women's group around the world.
I agree.
Why?
No, totally.
The rape.
Oh, yeah.
The decapitation of babies.
Putting babies in ovens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. How could they believe that this is propaganda?
I know you got to run. I'll tell you this very quickly. I joined social media to follow what kids are saying. Online, on X, and on Reddit, there are kids who deny that happened. All you got to do is Google it. These guys, as you know, had their iPhones out. They were laughing about it. They deny it happened. They think those tapes were manufactured. They're self-delusional. So
where are they getting their information from? TikTok? What's their source that gives credibility to their position?
Some of these kids are literally from the Middle East, and I guess they're going to radical Muslim terrorist groups who are doctoring the truth. I don't know. I can't imagine. To your point, you may support a Palestinian state. It's a far cry from that to supporting Hamas. It's a fact.
But it seems as though they have a more deeper, dark agenda. They seem to know they're organized, they're funded, they know exactly what they're doing, and they know exactly what they're trying to achieve.
Right.
And the media, the mainstream media, just goes along.
Right.
Doesn't take them to task.
Right.
And hold them responsible for their actions.
That's why we need more guys like you. I'm being serious. Well, you got to shine a light on it.
Listen, there are many lights that need to shine on it, but the most important light is the light that should shine from the university leadership.
Totally agree.
Because if they were to do their job, none of this would be an issue today. It's just unfair to the students, no matter who they are, that they find themselves in this hostile environment, and to make them believe that they've done something wrong and they should be punished and disrespected and create an environment where they just cannot learn.
Well, there's a board meeting in a couple of days, and I hope to God they address this, because the president's there along with the provost, who was in this meeting, and the board's aware of the meeting.
How can they find out more about the Jefferson Council?
Oh, they know a lot about it. They subscribe.
I'm talking about people watching tonight.
Oh.
Is there a website?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I send it to Aaron. I'll send you this and you can publish it.
You can publish it now. What is the website?
Okay, it's...
Oh, you don't remember. That's okay.
www.thejeffersoncouncil@uva.com.
www.thejeffersoncouncil@UVA.
For UVA, excuse me.
For UVA.
Yes.
www.thejeffersoncouncil4UVA.com.
Yeah. But you hit Jefferson Council UVA in Google, it's the first thing that pops up.
Well, thank you for your commitment, and thank you so much for joining us. When we return, the superintendent of the Oklahoma school system, Ryan Walters, and Kareem Nuri, a teacher and director at a private school, will be joining us to talk about the state of education. I'm Armstrong Williams, your voice, your future. We'll be back.
Thank you.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion. And that is, there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, a few weeks ago, I was in Oklahoma for a crisis in the classroom and had an opportunity to sit down with the Superintendent of Education, Ryan Walters, there. You know, what's really shocking is that Oklahoma is number 50. It's on the bottom in terms of education in this country. And obviously, the people have become so outraged, they wanted to make a radical change. So Ryan has been given the mantle to change the educational trajectory in the state of Oklahoma. What an overwhelming task for anyone. And also Kareem Nuri works in the classroom every day at a charter school here in Washington, D.C., and he sees firsthand what it takes for kids to learn what are the tools that are like, and whether it involves the system, the school system, or whether it involves parents. And so tonight, we just really want to have a conversation about education. Superintendent Walters, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me.
How does someone, as superintendent, what a task, turn around a state that is at the very bottom in education in this country? What do you do, and where do you start from? How do you even measure that you're making progress?
That's a great question. So the first thing we did was implement universal school choice. We want kids to be able to go to a private school, a charter school, or homeschooling. So that way, not only can a kid be aligned to the best educational option for them, but also we have competition now. And so the schools are competing for kids, and we've seen a tremendous impact that's made. Also, to your point, how do you measure it? Well, we have now new benchmarking techniques where we can see every 2 weeks what kids are learning, what the kids aren't. And if the kids aren't learning, we have got to be aggressive to find them tutoring, to get the best teachers in the classroom with them. And we've recruited the best teachers from around the country to Oklahoma, and we actually pay them based on merit as well. So if you do a great job, we pay you a lot more. And so we're going to continue to use these type of approaches to get back to the basics and to get our schools back on track.
So Kareem, you're at a charter school.
Yes,
the
sir.
superintendent just mentioned a charter school. Now, I know you're having an audio issue, you're not hearing him, so I apologize for that. But why is it that charter schools and these private schools seemingly they are better equipped to address these crises with these kids learning?
I think it's the charter schools address the issues with students better just because they have a little more freedom than a standard public school to decide, how they want to educate the students, what the curriculums are going to be, how they want to approach the curriculums, and who they hire. They have a lot more, at least at our school, we have a lot of latitude on who we hire. We get to choose our own standards that need to be met in order to hire staff members.
Superintendent Walter, how important is it that teachers in the classroom have a knowledge, a degree, an understanding of the subject matters that they teach? Because, in the United States, you can teach, but you don't have to be proficient in the subject. You don't have to be proficient in math or English or science, but yet you can teach it. And you and I both know that if you have a teacher that is teaching English and they know about Francis Bacon and about him in the scientific world, if you have someone like a Benjamin Banneker, who is one of the leading scientists, if you have somebody like Euclid, or if you have somebody who teaches math and the Pythagoras theory, if they know these subjects in and out, they know exactly what it takes to penetrate that kid, to make that kid learn. And oftentimes you'll hear a parent say, well, the teacher doesn't even understand basic math. I have to tutor the teacher. How do you make sure that, and I respect the fact that you your commensurate pay, reward teachers because you treat them and you pay them like CEOs because you value the impact they have on the outcome of education. But what about the classroom and the teachers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things we've done is, you're exactly right. You've got to have teachers. If you're teaching math, you got to know math. And one of the things we've done is to try to incentivize that also. We've gone out and actively recruited folks with different backgrounds. So, hey, if you work in a bank, we want you to come teach financial literacy at our school. If you work in the science and STEM fields, we want to give you alternative certificates to come to the classroom, because core knowledge is what's most important for a teacher. They need to have that subject matter expertise. So we do a lot of trying to find folks out in the fields in which they work and saying, hey, we'll train you how to become a teacher, but that subject matter knowledge is so important. We all know those teachers we had that were great teachers in our classrooms that really knew what they were talking about and inspired us to love that subject area. You've got to have that in your teachers.
Tell us what you inherited. What does it mean to be at the very bottom of education, number 50 in the United States?
Yeah, I came into office, we had teachers unions were running the schools. We had this transgender ideology in the classroom. It was a lack of focus, low expectations. I heard it all the time. Well, this school's never been successful. Well, this school's never been successful. And so I came in and go, well, why not? These kids are smart. These families are close and tight knit. What we need to do is get the families more involved. So we launched our parents' rights initiatives where we said, hey, you've got to talk to parents about what's going on in their kids' classrooms. We want all the parents to know how their kids are performing. And then we said, listen, we've got to get back to the basics. We've got to have a focus on mastering math and reading. And again, it's a no excuses mentality. We're going to meet that bar. We're going to push kids from all backgrounds. We're going to tell them, hey, we want you to achieve your God-given potential. And that means focusing in on that. But I'm going to tell you, the teachers unions had run amok in our state, and they had undermined our schools and created a system in which we were not performing.
So, Kareem, what have you, as a teacher and as a director of your charter school, I know kids learn differently. Mm-hmm. What is it that's consistent to get the most out of these kids, to learn, to thrive, to enjoy it, and you see the results in their testing?
Oh, man. I can't speak to the testing so much, but so I'm the director of the after-school programming, and one of the kind of linchpins of our program is that when we hire staff, we have them teach after-school classes that are based on their hobbies and their interests, so something that they're passionate about, right? So if someone is really into literature, then they're going to bring a certain type of excitement that they can convey to the students and get kids who may not be interested in literature excited in a way that someone who is not fluent in literature. It's like if someone is really into robotics, they're going to have a certain passion for it that becomes infectious because they're leading the class, and them being excited is going to make the kids excited by default. So one of my favorite examples is we had a sewing class for several years, and it was mostly girls, a few boys. And at our school, at the end of their 5th grade year, students have to do like a summative assessment. They pick a topic and they choose how they want to address it, and they do a presentation. And so one day I heard 2 of the boys that had participated in the sewing class walking by my office. They were trying to figure out what it was, how they wanted to present their learnings. And one of them says to the other, hey, we could sew something. And the only reason why they even had that as an option was because they had been in an aftercare program and taken that class, right? And so because the teachers were so excited and were able to get them to be excited enough to try something new, now they have a new skill set. The same thing happened when we did like a young architects class. We had 2nd and 3rd graders who developed a passion for multiplication because they knew they had to learn how to multiply in order to calculate their square footage for their floor plans. And kids who were like, after the first week say, oh, I want to be an architect, who had never thought about it before, right? And so when you have someone who has subject matter expertise and is excited about what's being taught, it's much easier to get their audience, the students, to buy into whatever they're teaching.
Superintendent Walters, let me hear you comment on that, because it goes back to having teachers teach in subject matters that they understand their authorities on, and they've spent their life studying.
Yeah, you've got to get back to the basics in education, which means getting teachers in the classroom that are passionate about what they teach, or knowledgeable about what they teach, and kids respond to that. Here in Oklahoma, one of the things that we do really well is we have a career tech system where we funnel kids into this, that, hey, when you show that you want to be an engineer, when you show that you want to be an electrician, a welder, hey, we move you along these pipelines. You know what? The electrician classes are taught by an electrician. So you get the ability to go in with people in the job force that, hey, this is what they've done for a living. They know what they're doing. They know what they're talking about. And you know, when you get a certificate with them, hey, you're ready to go. You're ready to get a job. And our young people love these programs. We have expanded them every single year. And we're actually even trying to get them down into earlier grades where we have in 4th and 5th grade. I was with some 4th graders out in the western part of Oklahoma a few weeks ago, and they're pouring concrete and learning how to do it. And guess what? They're using math and science. But you know what? Some of them are already like, hey, I can see a career in construction. And so we're trying to make sure that all of our kids have options, whether it's college, whether it's going directly into a career like that, or whether it's some kind of an apprenticeship. And again, you connect them with people that have that subject matter expert.
Let me stay with you. How do you comment and view the current trends in education, such as the debate over the curriculum content and the school choice, and what are the implications from your experience do they have for education policy in your state of Oklahoma?
Yeah, you know, we've pushed back on all this radical left-wing indoctrination in the classroom. We've seen, you know, talking about transgender ideology, sexuality. Well, we've said, no, we're not going to do that in the classrooms. Our focus is going to be very clearly, we want our kids to know American history. We think that makes them better citizens of the state, better citizens of the country, so that they understand what made America great and understand what our core principles are. We think that's very important to produce good citizens. We also think that, again, to be able to get a job, you've got to know the basics in math and reading. I hear from employers all the time, well, hey, if you just give me a kid that knows how to work hard and can learn, we'll teach them some of the skills necessary, but they got to have a basic level to understand how to jump in there. And then we've also seen a record amount of colleges that say, hey, the kids are coming to us unprepared. We've got to make sure that our kids have the ability to continue into wherever they want to go in life post-graduation. And so that really starts off with rejecting those left-wing ideologies, focusing on mastering the basics, and really making sure that we understand every kid's different, every kid's unique. That's how God created them. So we've got to have multiple pathways that kids can go down.
Kareem, how important is it to get the parents to buy into this and be involved, to continue this once the kid leaves the school and is home, to have that reinforced?
It's incredibly important. I mean, I know just personally, I'm the youngest of 7, so a lot of what I know and what I've experienced was because of my siblings taking an interest in just what I was learning and also them being excited about what they're learning. I know just from being in the school for almost 15 years now, it's very, very easy to see whose parents work with them at home and who encourage education at home. And it doesn't take long to figure out who's who. And so I don't know if the importance of parents contributing to their child's education at home can be overemphasized.
This is your voice, your future. We're honored to have the Superintendent of Education from Oklahoma, Ryan Walters, joining us, and Kareem Nuri in studio. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
Superintendent Walters, obviously in a state that's 50th in education, you do have schools in that state that perform well. Not all of them are at the bottom. And yet you talk about enhancing salaries and other things that you're doing to bridge the gap. But how are you bridging the gap between those schools across your state?
Yeah, great question. You know, one of the things we've seen is, again, as your other guest has described, we have some great charter schools in the state. As a matter of fact, we have some great charter schools here in the Oklahoma City and Tulsa areas. And so one of the things we've tried to share is, hey, what's best practice? What are they doing that's so effective with the same kids? I mean, they're right across town, and they're performing at a much higher rate at the kids in the traditional public school. So let's learn from those things, and let's get these folks working together where we've got leaders from schools working together, so we continue to highlight the schools that are doing the best jobs. in the state. We also try to find who are the best teachers. What are you doing so well? That's where I've told you before about us trying to find the best and brightest teachers and pay them a lot more money. We also have them help us go train the new teachers, help us train other teachers to do what you're doing in the classroom. And that's where when you begin to find those bright spots, you begin to highlight them. You begin to have more and more schools doing that. So that's one of the things we've continued to highlight is what schools aren't doing as good a job. How do we boost them? But how do we connect them with the schools that are doing a great job?
You know, we just saw a report where the Chicago school system is removing police officers from the schools. What impact do you think, Superintendent Walters, this will have on discipline, the environment, and actually putting some kind of code of respect and honor that this is not a place that you can come and disrupt. This is a place for learning. And obviously, resource officers play a very huge role in this process.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's been one of my big concerns is we've got to have kids that come to school to learn, to get an education. And so you've got to have discipline under control. We launched major discipline initiatives here in our state where we want to make sure, hey, teachers can teach. I mean, if Johnny's throwing something and cussing the teacher out all the time, the teacher can't teach. So we're going to bring discipline back to the classrooms. We also brought more school resource officers to our schools. We want parents to feel safe when their kids are at school. We want the kids to know this is a safe environment. You're not going to be part of any kind of violence here. And so I think it's of the utmost importance to keep school resource officers in the schools, keep discipline in the classroom, let the teachers know, hey, we're going to have your back here. We're going to make sure you're supported in the classroom and make sure the kids know there's an expectation not only on academics here, but also behavior. We're going to expect you to act right in our schools and we're going to protect all the students.
How do you deal with the disciplinary issues where you have a kid that continuously disrupt the classroom? Do you remove them? Do you give them 2 or 3 chances to see, working with the parents, that you can improve the behavior? And what happens if that behavior never improves and it's disruptive to the learning environment?
I've found that, or we've found as a program, that the student discipline doesn't really improve until it becomes, there's some onus put on the parents. Meaning that after a certain point, we ask them to stay home. So they have to miss, aftercare for a week or 2 weeks, or depending on the severity of the behavior, it could be longer. And
so discipline is critical.
Oh, absolutely. Because, you can ask a student to stop doing something multiple times, and they may not, especially if they don't think that you know their parents, they're not going to listen. That's just been my experience. And so once you establish that I do in fact know your mother and father, and I'm going to speak to them about your behavior, that will sometimes help. And then beyond that, once the parents now have to leave work early to come and pick up their children for a week, they're going to make sure that the behavior changes.
Superintendent Walters, someone raised this question earlier today, whether or not the United States really care about education and their children learning. We're here in Baltimore. Baltimore City is 23 in terms of out of 50 states in education. But the state of Maryland is ranked number 8. In fact, they're in the top 10. But yet, you can go to so many places across this country, and the education is just dismal. Why? Is it an indictment of our country? What is it that needs to change?
Look, what we've seen is the teachers' unions and these associations have so embedded themselves, and we've seen this with the Federal Department of Education too. They embed themselves and they support the status quo. So, they just argue that more money is the answer. More money is not the answer. We've seen states just push a lot more money and not make reforms and to not make a major difference. If you don't have school choice, if you don't have an emphasis on high-performing teachers, if you don't have an emphasis on outcomes, we've completely overhauled our accreditation system here in Oklahoma to focus on student outcomes. Are the kids reading on grade level? Are they doing math on grade level? Well, if not, we're going to affect your accreditation as a school district. These are things that have to change. Reform has to happen. And for so long in America, we've allowed the teachers' unions to dictate education. We've allowed the Federal Department of Education to dictate education. This is a state's issue and an issue for communities and families. And we've got to get it back to that. We've got to get it back in the families' hands to determine what their kids' education looks like. And that's how you truly fix it. So the federal government needs to get out of it, and we need to get more involvement from towns, communities, and families.
I must admit, I've been out of school for a very long time. But what has been so important to my continued education, especially as someone who writes, who is a business owner, is reading books. I read books every week. Reading books enhances so much of my skill set. It teaches me so much. I remember Dr. Carson's story about how he was failing in school, but he started reading geology, and how just reading the book better prepared him for the classroom than anything else. And it seems to me that these kids think that they can go online and go to social media and they can read an article, they can read something on TikTok, and to them, that's a reading experience. But man, I've read all the classics, and to this day, I still must continue my education through reading. Kareem?
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that my father instilled in all of us is that every year we had to take reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 R's. So he always encouraged us to read, and it's something that I've seen my siblings carry on with their children. Like, they all have library cards, they go regularly, and they definitely outperform their classmates.
And Superintendent Walters, explain to parents and students that are listening to us tonight why that reading is so important and what it reinforces.
And Armstrong, I love what you just said, because I hear that all the time. Well, you know, they read a social media post or they read something on. No, you need a book. You know, we have lost the art of getting kids to understand in depth a novel, reading through it, reading the classics. Remember, the classics also give you a great understanding of American culture, American history, American way of life. And so it is so important. We have study after study that shows that just reading 20 minutes a night with your child makes them exponentially more likely to graduate, exponentially more likely to read above grade level. It is incredible, but it is the reading with a child, letting them read to you, you reading to them. It is unbelievable. And just like you said, it's amazing how much that sticks with you when you really do in-depth learning, when you really do that in-depth reading. But so many times today, kids are reading just little quick sentences or things online. Go read the classics that have stood the test of time. Do a deep dive into a book. The understanding and the intellect that it will build over time is tremendous. And so just 20 minutes a night with your kid can make all the difference when we're talking about reading.
Are there any other pearls of wisdom that you can offer in terms of your experience in interacting with these kids? Because one of the things that Superintendent Walters has made clear is that you got to dig deep to find out what makes this kid enthusiastic about learning. And as a teacher, when you care about a student, you won't stop until you find what that magical button is.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that you alluded to earlier is that in the United States, I don't feel like teaching is an esteemed profession. I mean, we'll say, you know, doctor, lawyer, maybe ball player in some context. But in the countries that we lag behind in education, teaching is an esteemed profession. It's something that you pursue, something that people look up to with respect. And I think that that's really, really important. For the reasons that I pointed out earlier, like if I have gone to college and grad school for math, I can figure out how to make math exciting for any kid, whether they have a love for sneakers, whether they're into video games. We can talk about the math that's involved in those things. Maybe their mom gardens, and we can talk about the math involved in gardening, so they can make the connection from the classroom to their real lives. Because I think there's a quote that I like a lot. I think it's attributed to Einstein. It's that education is what's left over after you forget everything you learned in school. So a really, really good teacher that touches you, and we all have one that we remember from our childhood, is someone that truly educates us. And so we learn how to think. We learn how to, you know, stop and consider what someone else is going on, show empathy. And the only way to, or I would say the best way to kind of bridge all those gaps is to have subject matter expertise. So that way, wherever a kid is coming from, you can find a way to connect them to what they're learning in the classroom. And so that way, when they step outside the classroom, they see what they're learning everywhere. All right? And that's the part that sticks with you, not just whether or not you memorized how to add on a worksheet.
You know, Superintendent Walters and Kareem, I cannot tell you how many times I've read Shakespeare's Screw Tape Letters. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I go back and read Sir Isaac Newton. Because listen, I may have read some of the classics 10 or 15 years ago, no different than reading the Bible. But if I read the Bible today, it's a whole new world because then I have more of a maturity and more of an understanding about life. There are so many things that I missed when I read it 5 or 7 years ago. And sometimes even common sense, Thomas Paine, go back and read those over and over again. It still is a lesson. Sometimes it doesn't have to be different books. You can go back and read some books from decades ago, and it will still be a different experience for you.
Hey, look, there's no doubt about it. The more that you read, the more that you go back into it, especially those great works, it's so in depth. There's so much about human nature, so much understanding there. It not only helps you read, but it builds your intellect. The more that kids are reading, the more that we're emphasizing this in school, the more that families are doing it, the better society is going to be. So I think that you continuing to emphasize this, I love it. I think that that's how we get schools back on track, and that's how we get our kids back on track.
Now, so tell us. Wow, because let me tell you, you have a task ahead of you. Tell us where you expect to start seeing the major progress for the state of Oklahoma. Because, man, if you are able to remove them from where they are now to be in the top 10 percentile, I mean, you would be a hero not only for the state of Oklahoma, but for America.
Well, one of the things we've done is we removed the superintendent of our largest district and put in a reform-minded superintendent there. So she has been driving reform there. We have been partnering with her to move personnel, to hold folks accountable, and we're seeing tremendous success right now in Tulsa Public Schools because of it. We have 16 F-rated schools there. 12 of them are now positioned to come off the F list. So we're seeing these huge reforms going on in Tulsa. We're focusing on that in Oklahoma City and in our rural areas as well. But we wanted the biggest school district in the state to be one of the best ones. We thought that was really important. So we've spent a lot of time in Tulsa. We're seeing them get back on track. We've also moved to all the schools in the bottom 5% in the state. And we've told them, guys, we're going to come in and help you, but we got to shape up. We've got to change what we're doing because we can no longer allow schools to fail kids. And what we're seeing are the communities are rallying together. The parents are rallying together. Frankly, the teachers are too. They're saying, hey, we know we want our school to be a high performing school. So what we're starting to see is that momentum turn around for the state. And it's going to be a great story here, Armstrong. We're excited to tell folks about what we're doing here in Oklahoma and continue to watch the successes.
Kareem, you have the last word.
I'm a lifelong learner, something that was instilled in me by my father. I think education is super important, which is why I chose to stay in the field when I first started working at the school that I'm at in aftercare. I also think that there needs to be significant change in the way we approach education. And honestly, that's what that's one of the changes I'm trying to incite through my program is changing the way that children are taught by focusing on, subject matter expertise and even things that are not strictly academic, but showing them how to connect everything to real life.
Kareem Nuri, Thomas O'Neal, and a very special thanks to the Superintendent of Education in Oklahoma, Ryan Walters, for joining us for this special edition of Your Voice, Your Future. I'm Armstrong Williams.